Okay, this is our review for the upcoming quiz on the unit circle in radians. So, you should be quite familiar at this point with filling in the unit circle. Okay, so you can label the points at each of the quadrants. That's 1, 0, 0, 1, negative 1, 0, and 0, negative 1. And then in radians, that is 0 radians. And if you think about it, the 30, 45, 60, 3, 4, 6, just go in reverse. That's pi over 3. Pi over 4 at 45 degrees. Pi over 6 at 30 degrees. And remember, 180 is pi. So what would half of that be? That's pi over 2. Okay. What's pi plus 1/2? Right down here you have 3/2 pi. And then what are the values of all the functions? Everything is positive in quadrant 1. Only the sine is positive in quadrant 2. Only the tangent is positive in quadrant 3. Only the cosine is positive in quadrant 4. And then what are the values? At this point you should have remembered that's what? Square root of 3 over 2, 1/2. Square root of 2 over 2, square root of 2 over 2. And then 1/2 square root of 3 over 2. That's completely filled in, and then we just use that to answer every single question on this test. Sine of negative 3/2 pi. Draw the angle. So here is 0. Here is negative pi. Okay? Well, since I'm in halves, let's call this negative 2 over 2. So negative 3 over 2 would put me right here. Okay? So that's the angle negative 3/2 pi. I'm looking for the sine. Sine is the y value. Go to your unit circle. What's the y value here? That y value is 1. Tangent of 7/4 pi. 0. Pi. And let's call it 4 over 4. And then if I had 2 pi, let's call that 8 over 4 pi. So 7/4, is it closer to 4/4 or 8/4? It is closer to 8/4. So if I draw this angle, 8/4 would be a complete revolution. It does not go that far. So here is 7/4 pi. But the important thing is, what is the central angle or the reference angle? That is pi over 4. So how do I figure out the tangent of pi over 4 in the fourth quadrant? Okay, so this is tangent of pi over 4, that's y over x. At pi over 4, go look at your y value and your x value. They're both square root of 2 over 2. You divide them, you're going to get a 1. Well, in the fourth quadrant, that has to be a negative value. So tangent of 7/4 pi is negative 1. Cosine minus pi over 3. So this is 0. This is minus pi. Okay, let's think of it as minus 3 over 3 if I'm going in this direction. Okay, pi over 3, is it closer to 0? Is it closer to 3/3? It's going to be down in this fourth quadrant. This is the angle negative pi over 3. Okay. And so this reference angle is simply pi over 3. So what's the cosine? So I need to figure out what's the cosine of pi over 3 in quadrant 4. Cosine is your x value. Your x value at pi over 3. So at pi over 3, your x value is 1/2. You're in the fourth quadrant, cosine is positive. So this answer is 1/2. Cotangent of 3/4 pi. Again, let's draw the angle. So this is 0, and this is pi. Since I've got a 4, let's call it 4 over 4 pi. Well, that helps me know that 3/4 is just shy of 4/4. So if that's 3/4 pi, then the angle that takes me to 4/4, that has to be a pi over 4 angle. So what's the cotangent of pi over 4 in quadrant 2? So cotangent of pi over 4, cotangent is x over y. At pi over 4, the x and y coordinates are identical. X over y is going to be 1. in the second quadrant, cotangent is negative. So this answer here is -1. Okay. Okay, and then we'll do a few others. Secant of -pi/4. So -pi/4, here's 0. -pi/4. That means that this central angle is pi/4. So I need to figure out, so the cosine corresponds to x. The secant corresponds to 1/x. Okay? So at pi/4, what is 1/x? Okay, that's going to be 1/2 2/2, which is just 2/2. And cosine secant in the fourth quadrant, those are all positive. Cosecant of 5, 6 pi. Draw the angle. Here's 0. Here's pi. Since I have a 6, let's call this 6/6 pi. That helps me know that 5, 6 pi is just short of that. So if this is 5, 6 pi, that means that the central angle here is just pi/6. So cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So the sine is my y value. The cosecant is 1/y. So if I go to pi/6, what is my y value? The y value there is 1/2. So this answer is going to be 1/1/2. And I'm in the second quadrant. What's the value of sine in the second quadrant? Cosecant, those are all positive. So this answer is simply 2. Sine of 2 pi. So pretty easy. 0, pi, 2 pi. If I make that angle, what is that point on the unit circle? That's the point 1, 0. Sine is the y-coordinate. Y-coordinate there is 0. So that answer is 0. Tangent of 9/4 pi. So let's draw the angle. So this is 0. This is pi. Let's call it 4/4. And then when I get back to 2 pi, let's call that 8/4 pi. So that means that 9/4 pi is a bit further than 8/4. So that means I go to 8/4. And to get to 9/4, I go 1/4 more. So this is the angle of 9/4 pi, which makes this central angle here pi/4. So I'm in the first quadrant. Tangent pi/4, y/x. Square root of 2/2 divided by square root of 2/2. That is simply 1. Now, the second kind of problem where I give a value and you have to give me the angle or angles that make that true. Sine is the square root of 3/2, negative square root of 3/2. So on your unit circle, where is the y value square root of 3/2? That happens at pi/3. Well, this also happens to be a negative value. So where is the sign negative? That happens in quadrant 3 and quadrants 4. So what does that angle look like in quadrant 3 and quadrant 4? So if I had an angle here that was pi/3, okay? So this is 3/3 pi. So what's 3/3 pi plus 1/3 pi? That quadrant 3 angle is 4/3 pi. And then if I draw that angle in the fourth quadrant, so pi/3, okay, that's almost a revolution. So that would be what, 6/3? So it's 1/3 less than that. So this happens to be what, 5/3 pi. Those are the two answers for that one. Tangent equal -1. Okay, where's the tangent equal 1? That means y/x. Okay, so y/x is going to be 1 when the y and the x are equal to each other. That happens at pi/4. So this angle is pi/4. Its tangent, it's negative. That happens in quadrant 2 and quadrant 4. So in quadrant 2, if I had an angle that's pi/4, Then over here is 0, and here is 4 over 4 pi. So that angle is 3/4 pi. In quadrant 4, if I had a pi over 4 reference angle, that's almost to 8/4, so it's 8/4 minus 1, that is 7/4 pi. And the last two problems. You've got one side which is known and one side which is unknown. Tangent of negative 3/4 pi. So let's figure out what that is. Negative 3/4 pi. So if I draw this, here's 0, and over here at negative pi, let's call that negative 4/4 pi. So negative 3/4 pi puts me in the third quadrant with a pi over 4 central angle. So what's the tangent of pi over 4 in quadrant 3? So use my unit circle to figure out the tangent of pi over 4 in quadrant 3. Tangent of pi over 4, y over x, that's 1 on the unit circle. In quadrant 3, it is positive. So tangent of negative 3/4 pi is 1. So this problem becomes sine of theta equal 1. So this is just asking you the question, where is y equal to 1? There's only one spot on your unit circle that y is equal to 1. That's the very top of the unit circle, and that is pi over 2. And then the next question, the last one, cosine of 3/4 pi equals sine of theta. So figure out the cosine of 3/4 pi. So where is 3/4 pi? So if I draw 0 and pi, let's call this the same as 4 over 4 pi. That means that 3/4 pi has to be this angle right here, which terminates in the second quadrant. And more importantly, it means that the reference angle or the central angle is pi over 4. So the question becomes, what's the cosine of pi over 4 in the second quadrant? Cosine is the x value. So this is square root of 2 over 2 in the second quadrant. Cosine is negative. So this problem now turns into sine of theta equal negative square root of 2 over 2. Well, sine is the y value. Where do you see a y value of square root of 2 over 2? You see that at pi over 4. But where is the sine negative? Sine is negative in quadrants 3 and quadrants 4. So what does a pi over 4 angle look like in quadrant 3 and quadrant 4? So if this is pi over 4 in quadrant 3, this is 0, and this is 4/4 pi. So this angle is 5/4 pi. And in quadrant 4, and so 2 pi, remember we write that as 8/4 pi. That's my full revolution. So I'm 1/4 short of that. So that would be 7/4 pi. And that is it for the review.